buy-to-let is dead. Or at least, that's what everyone keeps shouting from the rooftops. Scroll through landlord forums and you'll see panic. Open the newspapers and you'll see headlines declaring the end of the rental property era. And on TikTok and YouTube, content creators are telling millions of viewers that buy-to-let investing has officially flatlined. But here's the question. Is it actually dead? Or is this just the beginning of a new chapter? Because while thousands of landlords are throwing in the towel, others are quietly pocketing bigger profits than ever before. The rules of the game have changed. The easy money has gone, and unless you adapt, you're going to get left behind. So today, we're lifting the lid on what's really happening. We'll break down the biggest challenges landlords face right now, from brutal tax changes and tough mortgage stress tests, to controversial legislation and shifting tenant rights. But we'll also look at the hidden opportunities, the strategies the savviest investors are using to not just survive, but thrive in 2025 and beyond. Stick with me until the end, because I'm going to reveal why the phrase buy-to-let is dead might just be the biggest lie in property right now, and how it's quietly creating the biggest transfer of wealth we've seen in decades. So let's start with this so-called death of buy-to-let. What people really mean when they say it's dead is this. It's not as easy as it once was. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, buy-to-let was almost a cheat code. You'd put down a deposit, buy a semi-detached in an average town, rent it out, and within months you'd be cash flowing. Rents went up, property values went up, and it felt like free money. In fact, whole generations built wealth this way. They weren't necessarily skilled investors either. They were just in the right place at the right time. But times have changed. We've had new tax rules, new lending restrictions, and new regulations around tenant rights. Mortgage rates that once hovered around 2% are now back up in the 5–6% range. Tenants have more power than ever, while landlords have more costs than ever. And this shift has created chaos. Some landlords are panicking, some are selling, some are warning newcomers to stay away entirely. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Property investment hasn't disappeared. People still need homes. Demand is still through the roof. And where demand exists, opportunity always follows. That's why I don't believe buy-to-let is dead. I believe it's evolving. The old strategies don't work anymore. But new strategies, they're working better than ever. And if you stick with me, I'll show you why. But first, let's look at the biggest barrier stopping people from even entering the game. The first real challenge is getting in at all. The phrase vanilla buy-to-let describes the simplest approach. Save up a deposit, buy a property, and let it out. Easy. But right now, vanilla is basically extinct. Why? Because the entry costs have gone through the roof. Take London. Average house prices there sit around £600,000. A buy-to-let mortgage usually requires a 25% deposit. That's £150,000 up front. Add in stamp duty, which is even higher for second homes, plus legal fees, plus a refurb if the property needs it, and suddenly you're well over £200,000 before you've even got the keys. And this isn't just a London problem. Across the UK, even in areas like Manchester, Birmingham, or Bristol, deposits alone can stretch into the tens of thousands. That's before you consider stamp duty surcharges, an extra 3% for buy-to-lets that eat into your starting budget. For a first-time investor, these numbers are daunting. Many don't even get past the spreadsheet stage. And here's the kicker. Even if you somehow scrape together the deposit, your problems aren't over. Because the bank might still say no. That's right, the deposit isn't enough anymore. You've got to prove that the rental income covers not just the mortgage now, but potential increases in the future. And with interest rates higher, those stress tests are harder than ever to pass. This is where people feel the game is rigged. They say, I can clearly afford this property, the rent covers the mortgage and more, so why won't the bank approve me? The answer lies in something most new investors don't even know about: stress testing. And that brings us to the next big challenge. Let's talk about mortgages, because this is where a lot of landlords are feeling the squeeze. For nearly a decade after the 2008 financial crash, landlords lived in paradise. Interest rates dropped to record lows, often between 1–2%. That meant borrowing was insanely cheap. Investors could refinance existing properties, pull out equity, and use it to buy more. Portfolios exploded in size, but those golden years made people complacent. Many landlords thought it would last forever. They built business models around ultra-low rates. And then came the wake-up call. Today, mortgage rates are back around 4.56%. On the face of it, that's not catastrophic. In fact, if you zoom out, the average UK base rate over the last 50 years has been around 9%. Older investors will even remember the nightmare of 17% rates in the late 80s. But here's the difference. The entire buy-to-let sector became addicted to cheap money. When rates rose, even slightly, the entire system felt the shockwaves. And it's not just the rates, it's the affordability tests that come with them. Here's how it works. Lenders don't just check if your rent covers the mortgage, they demand a safety buffer, often requiring your rental income to be 125% or even 145% of the mortgage. So if your rent is £1,250 per month, your mortgage can't be more than £1,000. If rates push your mortgage higher than that, suddenly the deal fails the stress test. This is why so many landlords are being turned away, even when, on paper, they could afford it. And this is where the frustration boils over. Because the average investor thinks, if I can cover the mortgage with rent, what's the problem? But the bank doesn't care about today, they care about protecting themselves tomorrow. That's why so many deals that used to work no longer do. But don't worry, this isn't the end of the story. Because while vanilla single lets struggle to pass, other strategies pass easily. And we'll come to those. But first, let's look at the most feared change of all, the legislation war. If higher costs weren't enough, landlords are now staring down the barrel of new laws. The biggest headline? The government's promise to abolish Section 21. Section 21, also known as no-fault eviction, has been a landlord's safety net for decades. It meant that, after a tenancy ended, you could take back your property without needing to prove tenant wrongdoing. Without it, landlords fear being trapped. Imagine a nightmare tenant, paying late, damaging the property, causing stress. Without Section 21, you'd have to go through lengthy legal battles to reclaim your house. That's why forums are exploding with panic. Some landlords are saying, "That's it, I'm done." They believe this is the nail in the coffin. But here's the truth. Section 8 still exists. That allows you to evict tenants who break their agreement, whether through rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, or other breaches. It's harder, yes, but not impossible. And whispers suggest there may even be exemptions for smaller landlords with under 5 properties. The government knows if too many leave, the rental crisis only worsens. So is it inconvenient? Absolutely. But is it the end of buy-to-let? No. What it really shows is how fragile landlord confidence has become. Because when fear spreads, people panic sell. And when people panic sell, opportunity opens up for those who keep their nerve. But legislation isn't the only sting. Taxation has been just as brutal. And it's here that some landlords really felt their profits vanish. If you ask older landlords what hurt them the most in the last decade, they'll probably say one thing: Section 24. This tax change flipped the entire sector on its head. Before it, landlords could offset mortgage interest as an expense. That meant if you earned £10,000 in rent and paid £7,000 in mortgage interest, you only paid tax on the remaining £3,000. After Section 24, you're taxed as if the full £10,000 was profit, even though £7,000 went straight to the bank. This created something called phantom profit. On paper, you looked rich. In reality, you were broke. I've personally seen landlords go from £10k a month net to £10k a year. Some even worse. This is why more and more investors now buy through limited companies. In fact, 60% of new property purchases are structured this way. Inside a company, mortgage interest is still deductible. But what about the landlords already holding properties in their personal name? They're stuck. Many have been forced to sell. Others are clinging on, hoping things change. The lesson here is brutal but clear. The government isn't finished targeting landlords. If you want to stay in the game, you've got to structure smart. And that brings us to the exciting part. The alternatives. The strategies that not only survive these challenges, but thrive in them. This is where the new game begins. Traditional single lets, the bread and butter of old-school landlords, are struggling. But alternative strategies, they're booming. Take HMOs, for example, houses in multiple occupation. Instead of one tenant paying one rent, you've got 5 or 6 tenants paying separately. Suddenly, that £1,000 mortgage is covered several times over. Banks love it. Yields are higher. Stress tests pass with ease. Then there's serviced accommodation, Airbnb-style rentals, tourists, business travellers, even NHS workers. Done right, these properties can generate 2 to 4 times the income of a normal rental. Risky? Yes, you need to understand occupancy rates, seasonality, and regulations. But the rewards are huge, and don't overlook commercial property. Shops, offices, warehouses, they come with higher yields, longer leases, and tenants who often cover repairs themselves. It's a completely different world, but one with serious opportunity for those willing to learn. The message is simple. Vanilla might be struggling, but property isn't dead. It's just demanding creativity. And here's the golden rule that overrides everything else: supply and demand. The UK is in a housing crisis. Demand for rental properties has never been higher. More people are renting for longer. Immigration, population growth, and changing lifestyles all add pressure. But supply? It's broken. House building targets are missed year after year. Local councils can't keep up. Developers are slowed down by red tape. What happens when demand skyrockets but supply stalls? Prices rise, rents rise, and those who hold property, no matter how tough the journey, benefit in the long run. That's why, despite all the doom and gloom, property remains one of the most resilient assets in the world. So here's the brutal truth. Buy-to-let isn't dead, but it has killed off the lazy landlord, the ones who thought it would always be easy, the ones who didn't bother to learn new strategies, the ones who relied on luck instead of skill. They're gone. The ones left, the ones still thriving, are the adapters. The investors who embrace limited companies, who pivot into HMOs, who experiment with serviced accommodation, who stay one step ahead of legislation. Because the truth is, property isn't simple anymore. But for those willing to adapt, the opportunities are bigger than ever. So, is buy-to-let dead? No, it's alive, but it's changed. The days of easy profits are over. The days of creative strategy, smart structuring, and adaptability are here. Yes, the barriers are higher. Yes, the rules are tougher. Yes, the profits are slimmer if you do it wrong. But demand isn't going anywhere. And that's why property investment isn't going anywhere either. So the real question isn't whether buy-to-let is dead. The real question is, are you ready to evolve with it? Because in this new era, the ones who adapt don't just survive, they dominate.